Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. SAG-AFTRA Foundation and BroadwayWorld continue their filmed Conversations on Broadway series. This event, which is coming from the Robin Williams Center, is a special conversation with Tony Goldwyn, who is not only one of the greatest actors of his generation, he's also one of the most sought-after directors and producers. He is known to millions of fans for his role as President Fitzgerald Grant on the hit Shonda Rhimes TV series Scandal. And now he is back on Broadway, co-starring alongside Bryan Cranston in director Ivo Van Hove's stunning production of Network. Please welcome Tony Goldwyn. Well, first off, welcome back to Broadway. How does it feel?
It feels like coming home.
Yeah.
It really does. It's been, you mentioned Promises,
Yeah.
which I did right before Scandal, and that was 8 years ago. So I haven't done a play since, so it's really a beautiful thing. And to be back in such an extraordinary production as the one we're doing now is, it's what I dreamed about doing when I was starting out. Wondering if anyone would ever give me a job. So the fact that I can walk to work through Central Park and go into the theater is pretty magical.
Yeah. And what a way to return. I mean, for those of you who have seen the show and for those of you who haven't, you must see Network. This production is absolutely stunning in every fashion of how it's done. I mean, when you were first approached about doing this, like, you're working with Ivo. I mean, just explain what the look of the show and the feel.
Well, for those of you that know the movie Network, it was made in 1976. Sidney Lumet directed it, and Paddy Chayefsky wrote it. And it was Chayefsky was writing sort of a dystopian satire about where he saw our media culture going. And everything he said has come true, and then a lot more. So Ivo wanted to do, he felt he wanted to do this screenplay as a piece of theater. And so what he's done is, it's still set in '76, but it feels very contemporary, and cameras and screens and multimedia are a very important part of the show. So there are literally cameras on stage, there are projections everywhere. We literally do sort of reality TV is kind of part of the experience, and Tatiana and I do a scene out on the street live every night on 44th Street, and then walk right on stage and do another scene. And that's just projected on this giant screen that the audience is watching, and no one believes that we're doing it live. They're like, no, you guys filmed that ahead of time. So it's very, very unusual. It's kind of almost like a piece of performance art, that you're sort of dropped into this world that Ivo and his longtime life partner and theatrical designer, Jan I can't pronounce Jan's last name.
That's why I was going to let you do it.
Has created this environment that's just extraordinary. I mean, as an actor, to just, it's like being dropped in a fishbowl. You know, like those fish bowls with all the castles and things, and you go, oh, that must be cool to be a fish, and you're like in your little universe. That's what it feels like to be in Network every night.
Because it's so theatrical and filmatic and everything.
Yeah, and there's a restaurant on stage.
Yeah.
Because there's a restaurant scene, a very unusual restaurant scene, and involving me and Tatiana. And so Ivo was like, well, why don't we just have a restaurant on stage and make it real? So there are people having dinner and being served alcohol throughout the play, and Bryan and I do a scene at the bar that is our first scene together, and it kind of opens the show. And we're actually in the wings of the theater where the bar is, and there's people behind the bar eating and drinking that are closer than you are to me, and yet it's projected to the entire 1,000-seat Belasco Theater while we're doing it with a camera right in our face. It's very unusual.
But I also like when you walk into the theater at half hour, you're all in the makeup chairs getting ready. I mean, they're in the newsroom getting everything set.
Yeah.
That's got to be, is it exciting for you as an
I don't
actor?
like it.
Okay.
Bryan and I both feel Evo wanted all the actors to come out on stage and do our warm-ups like on stage as the people are eating their dinner and as the audience is coming into the theater and to talk to people. And I don't have that kind of concentration. I can't. I got to get my shit together before I go on stage. So, but I kind of without, except for me and Brian, Tatiana goes right out there and does yoga and like, and Frank Wood, the brilliant actor, Frank Wood, does his funniest warm-up. He goes on, and he's like, plays imaginary tennis on stage. He's like, I don't know if that's some acting exercise or he's like, does like archery. I don't know what he's doing. But people do these warm-ups, or they do, Henry Stram goes out and does a headstand for 10 minutes every night. And then Nick Wyman, who is brilliant in the show, Nick goes and just kind of chats up whoever's in the restaurant and has long talks with them every night. And then we come out and the makeup stations are on, it's in the wings kind of, but so that we do. I get our hair and makeup kind of fixed up. But and then periodically Nick or somebody will bring a fan over to take a selfie, which is fine. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I find it very weird. I can't, maybe I'll relax into it, but I don't know.
No, but I watched you the other night. You were like at the makeup chair, getting ready or whatever. So, do you like to arrive to the theater early?
I have to. For this show, I always do a bit.
Yeah.
But I find this show's very, very challenging. I could not possibly just show up at half hour and then go do the show. It's very challenging vocally, as you can probably hear. My voice is a little tired. And I don't know, I don't know why. Tchaikovsky's language, it's very intense energy-wise. It's almost like, I feel like, maybe I said this, it's like doing a musical. Because Evo has orchestrated everything. There's so much happening all at the same time, and it's like, it does not. It's like getting on a roller coaster for 2 hours. So this show, I need to be there at least an hour ahead. Sometimes I feel like at 2. It just depends. We'll see as we get into the run, but we just opened last week. So,
talk about who you play.
So I play Max Schumacher. For those of you who don't know the movie, for those of you that do, William Holden played him in the movie. For those of you that don't, the film is about a television network that is struggling in the ratings, and particularly their news division is struggling in the ratings, and they've recently been taken over by a giant corporation. And at the beginning of the show, I am the head of the news division, longtime head of the news division of this network. And Howard Beale, who Brian plays, is our longtime news anchor, and it's sort of a legend in television news, a la kind of, Walter Cronkite-ish, or, maybe not quite. He maybe was just a little under Cronkite, if Cronkite was the man, but we all came up together in that way. And Howard's gone through some very difficult times recently, and I ended up having to fire him at the beginning of the show, because he's getting such low ratings, and he's been depressed and having a hard time. And Howard goes on the air after being fired and says, I'm announcing my retirement, and a week from tonight I will kill myself on live television. So I just want to let you guys know. So you can tune in, we'll get great ratings. And it sets off a firestorm, and the ratings go insane. And this corporation, the corporate interests feel they have a tiger by the tail, and they exploit this man who is in fact losing his mind. And I'm trying to hold the line on journalistic integrity unsuccessfully, and to protect, maybe more importantly, protect my best friend from being eaten by the wolves. And I don't do a very good job.
What's it like sharing the stage with Bryan Cranston?
Well, I guess it's like, playing tennis with Roger Nadal or something, Roger Federer or something, or playing with a great tennis player. You just have to bring your A game, and he hits the ball hard, but it's thrilling and fun. And, for those of you that know Bryan, he's just the sweetest, kindest, most down-to-earth human being. So it's easy, but it's challenging at the same time. He's I find myself sort of in awe of him as a performer because he's what he does in this show. I really recommend you guys see it. It's kind of a monumental performance, and it's like King Lear or something. What he's, it's very taxing, and he just gives 150% every performance. I never have seen him hold back, ever. And I've never worked with anyone like that before. I mean, even the great Kristen Chenoweth, when we were doing Promises, Kristen had to hold, like there were performances where she just held back on her vocally a little bit because it's just so hard doing Broadway, and Brian swings the bat as hard as he can every show. It's amazing.
And then there's Tatiana,
Yeah, and Tatiana's also so wonderful. Different because this is only her second play. Yeah. She's this incredibly gifted actress, and I remember seeing Orphan Black and going, who the hell is that? Like, what did I just see? The work that she did, even in that pilot, I was like, I couldn't believe it. And she brings, and she's also just a natural theater actress. But she did a play at Second Stage last summer, Mary Page Marlowe, and that was her first time on stage. And she doesn't show it, but what is Tatiana like? Tatiana's like, she's just game. Yeah. It's that thing, she's so fun to act with because she's just completely open and like, let's see what happens. Completely relaxed and down for anything, and super excited all the time to see what's up and what we could do tonight. Again, deeply humble, which to me is the mark of all good actors. And that kind of student mind, like she's just always feels like she's making it up as she goes along. So it's really thrilling and I do a lot with her. I mean, I guess I do a lot with everybody, but Brian and I have a very specific and special relationship in the show, and Tatiana and I do as well. Yeah.
The play has been adapted by Lee Hall from Pat H. Chayefsky's Academy Award-winning screenplay. It must be so great to say those words. What a beautiful, beautiful
really
script,
is, and
right?
Lee did such an incredible job because it's so faithful to Patty's screenplay, and yet Lee really brought the way he structured it, and there's additional dialogue where he moved stuff from one scene to another. And Lee, if you don't know, is a great playwright. He wrote both the film and the theatrical adaptation of Billy Elliot, which is one of my favorite movies, and it was so amazing on stage. And God, so many other things. He did War Horse, right? What else did Lee do? He's just extraordinary, and so. But it's Patty Chayefsky. It really. I feel very lucky to, and every night, it's one of those plays where every night you hear something different. Yeah. That's one of the things that's really interesting, which is sort of like doing Shakespeare. You're like, oh, that's what that means. Or, I'd never heard that before, even though you've been hearing it for weeks.
Because there's so much going on that stage. It's so beautiful.
There is, and it's a very dense screenplay. I mean, he's got a lot to say about America and television and politics and
so ahead
money.
of its time.
Yeah.
Like you said, it was a satire then. Now it's reality today.
Well, that's what Ivo said in our first rehearsal. He said, in '76, this was a satire, and it's not a satire anymore. It's very real.
Yeah. I want to go back to the beginning. You grew up in one of the most famous and prominent Hollywood families. So where did your love for performing begin, and what were your earliest creative outlets?
Well, my family my grandfather was one of the founders of the movie business on my father's side, but on my mother's side, my grandfather was a Broadway playwright and screenwriter named Sidney Howard. And my mother had been an actress pretty much up until I was born, and then she stopped and became a painter. But her whole world was the New York theater, and that was kind of my indoctrination. To me, that's what I fell in love with. I sort of didn't have any interest in the movies. But when I went to the theater at 4 years old, I was like, oh, what is that? And a lot of my I never knew any movie stars growing up because my parents were determined that we wouldn't become Hollywood brats. So I was never allowed on a set. I never knew a celebrity, not one. But I knew a lot of actors who were my parents' close friends, who were actors in the theater or just working actors. So that to me was where the romance was in it. And as a performer, I guess I didn't think I wanted to do something other than the business, because Goldwyn was kind of having a famous last name can be kind of oppressive, you know, and you just get sick of talking about it and you want to be your own person. So, but I realized I loved performing in elementary school, you know, and then it was like in choir in middle school, and then in high school, I decided to audition for the school play in 9th grade because my older brother was kind of he was in the theater department, did all the plays, and was kind of the lead actor. John was 2 years older than me, and it was Inherit the Wind, and he was playing Henry Drummond, right? Isn't that the character's name? The Clarence Darrow character. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'll go read for it. And so I read for a small part and didn't get cast. But I got a one-line part, but I didn't get the part I wanted. And then, but I remember vividly this experience of sitting with the drama teacher and opening this book and reading this audition. And I was just like, oh, I know how to do this. It was so thrilling. I'd never felt that before. It was so thrilling. I'd never felt that I was any good at anything. And I was 14 and had the insecurities that most 14-year-olds have. And it was like being shot up with adrenaline. It was the weirdest thing. Yeah, and then I didn't get the part. Little did I know how much that would tell me about being an actor. But anyway, but I did my one line, and that was exciting. And yeah, so that was kind of how and then eventually I started getting, you know, better parts.
Better parts.
Yeah.
Was there a defining moment for you when you said, I can now do this as a business? Like, I'm really going to go for this?
I'm still waiting.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. No, yeah. What was it? There were a few, you know, because you have that, and then you get disappointed, and you think, oh, I was wrong. So I had a lot of it. You know, like I sort of became in high school, after that, and being like getting crappy parts for a couple of years. By the time I was a senior, I was like the lead. I was like head of the theater department, and you know, like playing the lead roles, and I was like, I'm pretty hot shit. And I go to college, and I got cast in the lead role in the first play I auditioned for at the little college in upstate New York that I went to, and all of the older students hated me. It was Sam Shepard's Tooth of Crime, and I got cast as Crow, which is so weird. Yeah. And there were all these seniors. I think they were seniors or juniors who like thought they should have been cast, and they were so mean to me. One of them, I won't name his name, is a wonderful actor who's still working today, and I have a lot of respect for him. But he was so mean to me, and he played a smaller part, you know. But I did Tooth of Crime, and I was like, again, I'm pretty hot shit, you know. Then I transferred after a couple of years at Hamilton, where I was, to Brandeis, because Brandeis I'd heard had this very serious theater department. I was just like, I'm in upstate New York. I don't know how I figure out being an actor. And so I went to Brandeis and could not get cast in anything. I showed up, at Hamilton, I was pretty but it was a tiny school, and I got to Brandeis and had this big theater and a graduate program and all this stuff, and I went in and auditioned I must have auditioned for 15 plays and didn't get called back to one. And they were like, no one, it was like, you just feel they dismissed it. And I took an acting class, and the teacher, who to this day is the best acting teacher I've ever had, who eventually, thought better of me, but at first I just could not do anything right in his class, and he was so mean to me, and I was just like, oh my God, what do I do? And I was 20 at that point. I was a junior, decided this is what I'm doing with my life, and I was failing. Yeah. And then so I said, well, I guess I'm not getting any. The only part I got, it was a student production my junior year of Company. It was the worst production of Company that has ever been mounted in the United States of America. And
What'd you play?
Oh, I did not play Bobby. I played Paul, the husband. So I don't even think I had a song. I think I had a couple of lines. And I'm kind of wrong for Paul, but I played Paul. And it was embarrassing. Oh my God, it was so bad. It was kind of fun, but it was terrible. So I didn't know what to do. So I went and I looked in the local Boston papers to see if I could get an audition or something. And I said, well, you're not going to cast me here. Let me see if I can get something away from school. And there was this place called the Boston Shakespeare Company, which was a semi-professional theater company. It was like non-equity, but they did shows in downtown Boston. And they had a nice theater. And they were doing Richard III. So I went and auditioned and I got cast as the Duke of Clarence, which is a very good part. And I was like, what? And it was all grown-ups. I was the youngest person. The other young person that was cast in that show was Courtney B. Vance. Courtney was at Harvard, and I was at Brandeis, and Courtney was cast as one of the murderers who killed me in the tower, because Clarence gets murdered in the tower after this great speech about this terrible dream he had. So I got cast in this. Okay, so you want to hear something really mean? No. So I thought, cool, I'm in this real show. So I go to the head of the theater department, who was my acting teacher, and I was a theater major, and I wanted to get his permission to let him know, and I didn't want to let him know I was doing this, and this is the guy who I'd been stinking up his class for 6 months. And I go in, and I get a meeting with him, and I say, Ted, I just want to let you know I got cast in this show, and I want to make sure that's okay, and I might have to miss class or something here and there. And he said, he was this cranky older guy, and he smoked, they talk like this. Ted Kazanoff, he's a truly brilliant teacher, the best I've ever had in my whole career, I swear. But not the nicest. Ultimately very big-hearted, but not user-friendly. You're like, oh, well, I just think you should know why they hired you. I said, what? He goes, well, I just think it's important. I mean, it's great, but you know why they hired you. I said, what? He said, what's your last name? I mean, that's obviously why they hired you, and you should do it. I mean, it's great, but you just need to know the reality is that. And I went, maybe, okay. That may be true, but I'm still going to do it because it's a good opportunity. Yeah, that's great. I was crushed. I was just like, shit, okay, well, all right, maybe that's true, I don't know. So I went and I did it, and I can't say I was good, but I did okay. And for a 20-year-old kid, and Ted brought my acting class to see the show. Like, they were being supportive, and by that time they sort of got to know me, and they were like, oh, well, let's go see Tony's show. And it was after the show, I remember this look on his face. He was so surprised that I was good, relatively speaking. Again, it was for a college kid, I did okay. And I just remember this sort of stunned look on his face, like, where did you come from? Like, what? And everyone was like, so at the end of the year, that was the whole spring, we did it for 3 or 4 months. At the end of the spring, we auditioned for the fall plays for my senior year, and Ted cast me as Chris in All My Sons, which is the lead in All My Sons, which he was directing on the main stage, that. And so then all of a sudden, boom, I was like the hot guy in Brandeis Theater, which everything's relative, right? I mean, and that has happened to me over and over and over again in my career.
Because I had many stars here. They say when you read off all the things that Tony has done, a star told me once, you have to look at the in-between, Richie, of all these jobs where I had nothing, where you don't know what's going to come.
Yeah, it's you just get used to that. That's the thing, I'm used to it. So I'm like, okay, no one's ever gonna give me a job. So what am I gonna, I gotta make it happen for myself. That's how I became a director, because I was just like, the reason I became a director was because all through my 20s, I like struggled and struggled and struggled, and I started working fairly consistently, but it didn't feel like I had traction because I was always out of work. And then I get a job on like a guest star on a TV show, but I'd work for 3 days. And then I wouldn't work for 3 months. And I'd be like, oh my God, this is tough. And then finally I got Ghost, which was a huge break for me, and put me like, I was like, okay, thanks. So okay, now I'm on the map. And I was 29 when I did that. And then I had this big hit off Broadway in this beautiful play I did called The Sum of Us that same year. And like I got an Obie Award, and I was like, okay, I did my job. I'm in a hit movie, I'm one of the leads, I've got an Obie Award for this play. I said to my agents, like, make me a star. Like, I did my part, what happens now? Nothing is the answer to that. I auditioned for stuff, and I don't know, it was like then the next movie I didn't do another movie for a year. Wow. I remember while I was doing The Sum of Us, I got offered this TV movie, it was a cable movie, in the relatively early days of cable. This was like 1990. It was a TNT movie. It was sort of an interesting movie about the Iran hostage crisis. It was not a very good part. I played Jody Powell, Carter's press secretary. But they offered me $65,000 to do this, and that was more money. That was the same amount of money I got paid to do Ghost. That's how much I got paid to do Ghost. At the time, it seemed like a fortune, but it was not much money. But to me, I was making whatever I was making off Broadway. I needed the money, and I was like, and also I wasn't used to being offered work, so I was like, okay, I'll do it, I guess. I didn't know how to decide, you know, and my agents didn't say, no, you need to wait and be patient, and we're gonna find the right thing for you, and I just didn't know, so I took work because I was an actor, you know, and then the next movie I did, which was a year later, was fun, but it wasn't very good, and then the next one I did was both not fun and not good, and did not make money, and all of a sudden I found 2 years later, I was like, oh, you were that guy who did Ghost. Like, yeah, well, you were hot for a minute, and so suddenly I was getting jobs, so I was very, very grateful for that, and was making more than $65,000, so that was good. But I was able to, the good news, I was able to support my family, but I wasn't a star. I was like, people thought I was a good actor, and I was getting work regularly enough, but I wanted to be a leading actor, you know, and it wasn't happening. So I thought, God, man, in 10 years, I can't do that. I can't be doing this. I got to figure something else out. So I started, I thought, well, I need to be in, next time I'm in a hit, which is like, only God can decide that. I want to be able to have something that I know I want to do. Like, okay, so now I'm in a hit, now I have leverage, so here's what I want to do. So I thought I'd find scripts for myself to act in, and then that I could then produce. Didn't want to be a director, and then I found a script after looking at hundreds of scripts that I fell in love with, that didn't feel very right to act in it, but I wanted to meet the writer, and she didn't have any other scripts. We started talking about it. I said, well, this is what I think you should do to make this better, and she said, well, would you produce this with me, because I really love your ideas, and anyway, so I worked for a couple of years on this script, trying to get another director to do it, and I got so invested in it, I didn't want to give it to somebody else, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to direct this myself. And it was sort of, by that time I'd realized that there was nothing you can't do, you just have to challenge yourself to do it. I was afraid of directing. I thought, well, who am I to say that I could do something like this? And I was like, I'm going to do it. And so then, like, God did intervene, and suddenly the money fell in my lap, and I got a call saying that Dustin Hoffman had read this script.
Tell them the name of the movie.
So it was A Walk on the Moon.
Great film, one of my favorite movies.
Thanks. And I had, you know, I got a call from CAA one day going, Tony, you know, you have controlled the rights to this project, right? And I was like, yeah, and you want to direct it, right? Yeah. Well, Dustin Hoffman wants to read it. I was like, what? He said, well, someone had read that script years ago, and they told him about it, and he's just started, his company has like got a financing deal to make independent movies, and they want to read it. And I was like, I had literally not shown the rewritten script to anybody since I decided to direct it, and I sent it to Dustin's company, and they were like, yep, we want to do it, and you can direct it. so then, but I'd been working on it for 4 years at that point. And then I stumbled in and found, as soon as I started directing, I was like, oh my God, I know how to do this. And that opened up a whole new thing. So my point was, ever since then, I realized, oh, I can't sit around and wait for someone to give me a job. I got to make it happen for myself. Yeah. And ever since I've taken that was 20 years ago, and ever since I've taken that attitude towards my career, I've been so much happier and more regularly employed. And it's taken the pressure off of my acting career, because at times when I wasn't getting so much acting work, or at least not getting things that I was excited about, I was like, all right, that's not happening, I'm gonna do this.
What is the best bit of advice that you've been given, either personally or professionally?
The best advice I've ever been given, which people who've heard me talk before, because I say it all the time. When I was 19 at Brandeis, not getting cast, thinking, what the hell am I doing? My brother-in-law was a famous jazz musician named Gary Burton, who is really one of the greats. And Gary, we were at brunch or something, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And how do you know if you can do it or not? And he said, Tony, when I was 19, I felt exactly the same way you did. And he said, I was from Indiana. I was from a little town in Indiana. He was a child prodigy at the Vibes, is what Gary plays. But he didn't, you know, he said, I came to New York at 19 with no idea if I could actually be a professional musician. And he said, I said to myself, I know that if I give 100%, if I commit 100% to what this passion of mine, either I will end up doing that, or I will end up doing something else that I don't even know about yet, or I don't remember if there was a third option. Oh no, yeah, the third option was, but if I don't give 100%, I'll be the guy who at 40, 50 years old looked back and said, gee, maybe I could have done that. Maybe I could have tried, but I was too scared to do it. And he said, you don't want to be that guy. So I was like, okay, thank you, Gary. So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to commit 100% until I see a different path. And that saw me through a lot of hard times. Because and even hard times after success, when I suddenly was struggling again, you know, and things weren't going the way that I wanted, or I'd have a failure, you know, that hurt a lot, you know, I would just be like, well, I made a commitment to do this, so I'm just gonna keep doing it until I get the impulse to do something else. You know, like directing was something else that took me into another path, or maybe it would have been teaching. I don't know what I would have done if you know, if I hadn't been cast in Goes to 29 or Look at Bryan Cranston. You know, when I worked with Bryan, he was 42 or 44 when we did From Earth to the Moon. And Bryan had been, you know, a working actor, but I would say struggling, you know. He was Dr. Tim in Seinfeld. So people thought he was a really good actor. And I guess Bryan he'd been on a soap and he'd done stuff, but I know when we did From Earth to the Moon, he was thrilled to get that part. He was actually recast. Someone else was cast and was fired. And they brought Bryan at the last minute. And I didn't know him. And as we were working together, as I got to know him, I was like, this guy's a genius. He was like the funniest person I'd ever met, and his mind worked in this crazy way that I thought was so unique. And I said to myself, wow, man, look, somebody could be working at 40, in their mid-40s, early to mid-40s, and nobody knows how great. And he'd like got a small part in Saving Private Ryan, I remember. He just worked with Spielberg, and he had like one small scene, and he was, you know, but so things were going okay for him, but he wasn't, no one knew him really. And yet, then a couple of years later, he got Malcolm in the Middle, and I remembered seeing that going, see, because he was so brilliant in that show, and it was such a great vehicle for him. Then, of course, Walter White changed television history, you know. But it was a testament to, you know, Brian was just focused and committed to what he loved. And he still is exactly, that's the thing that, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, you just feel that's what drives him every performance. Yeah. He's 100%, man, just because he's so committed. That was the best advice I ever got.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you. This was a masterclass this afternoon. I mean, what an insightful, you were so honest about the art, the craft of acting, directing, producing, just being a human, trying to work your way through this career. Thanks, you have 8 shows to do this week. I wanted to have you here for the longest time. If you haven't seen him in Network, you must go see him in Network. Thank you, Tony Goldwyn.
Thank you. Thank you, all. Thanks, that was such a great talk.
Here we go.
All right.